Ahoy! Charybdis is finally revealed, so we're gonna take a look at her kit, get a bit of a better idea of how she plays, what she does, and how strong she will be maybe. Charybdis will be released into Smite on the 24th of August, and she is a Greek hunter. To give you a quick overview of her abilities and playstyle, she is mostly basic attack focused. She generally has a medium range on her abilities, requiring her to get relatively close to enemies to get the full potential out of her kit. 3 of her abilities have crowd control, but one of them even has 2 crowd control effects, so she has a total of 4 different crowd control effects. She has an untargetable escape, but with a bit of a wind up, which makes her escape potential very unusual for a hunter. One of her abilities is a basic attack stim, meaning that this further enhances her basic attack focus. Her kit offers ways to make basic attacks easier to land, and she has relatively wide abilities, which leads me to believe that she will likely be relatively easy to pick up. Now, as for her abilities, the first thing we need to talk about are her basic attacks. Her first 2 basic attacks in the chain are normal basic attacks, where she throws daggers. Her third basic attack in the chain throws daggers too, but it throws 3 daggers in rapid succession, each dealing 33% damage. That means you'll have to aim at targets a bit differently in order to make sure that all 3 shots hit. So it can be an upside if you have a hard time hitting one of the shots maybe, but also a downside because it's harder to confirm all 3 than a single basic. More importantly, all of these attacks count as individual basic attacks and therefore can proc item effects. In order to balance this a little bit, item damage from on-hit effects is reduced by 35% for her. This affects primarily Odysseus Bow and Concise. To put this into perspective for Concise specifically, normally you would deal 300% damage of Concise with 3 basic attacks, 100% of the damage per basic attack. In Charybdis' case, instead, you would shoot 5 basic attacks in the same time frame, with each dealing 65% damage on item effects for a total of 325%. So it's still a small increase over just normal basic attacks, but it's not as massive as it may seem otherwise. Where this effect will likely really shine is with crit, because no reduction is applied here, and this should be a very easy way to apply on-hit effects from crit items, since you have 3 chances instead of 1 on your 3rd hit to proc with a crit. Next, let's talk about Charybdis' passive. This is somewhat similar to Poseidon's passive, since she also has a tide meter that stacks up. For Charybdis, her tide meter stacks up with successful basic attacks, and each basic attack provides 2% tide on hit. At maximum tide, Charybdis has an additional 10% attack speed plus 0.75% per level. That means at level 20, she can have up to 25% extra attack speed from the tide from her passive, as long as it's fully stacked. Charybdis' first ability is Spike Shot. Here she activates the maw, which is the mouth that is hidden under her cloak, and this becomes her basic attack projectile for 4 seconds, so it is a steroid. The shots deal normal basic attack damage, but they are fired faster, with faster projectile speed than normal basic attacks, and the area in which they can hit is also wider. So effectively, this makes it much easier to hit your basic attacks, and that is for a duration of 4 seconds, which is quite a lot in a boxing match. If the projectile hits a guard or a wall, additional splinters shoot out from that impact location, which also deal additional damage. That's not a really high amount, it's flat 10 to 30 with 10% scaling, but these also increase your tide by 2% per hit, which should be a very easy way to increase your tide quite drastically. Especially this effect also makes me wonder if she could be used in jungle, since the spikes would always bounce back from behind the camps for extra damage. This ability has a balance measure though to make it a little bit weaker for clearing, and generally seems like she's designed to scale more into late game. The minion damage this ability deals is decreased initially. On the first rank, this will only deal 60% of the normal basic attack damage to minions. This scales up with 10 per rank, so at rank 5 of the ability, you will have 100% scaling. The ability costs 50 to 70 mana, and the cooldown is not particularly long, with 14 seconds at all ranks. Charybdis' second ability is Capsize. In this ability, she first channels her maw briefly, consuming water, which she can then launch towards an enemy. This deals damage 80 to 280 plus 85% scaling, and slows enemies as well. Additionally, it reduces the physical protection of any enemy hit by it. There's more to Capsize though. The ability can be charged and consumes your tide while doing so, with a maximum of 40% being consumed. This increases the width of the ability and also buffs the ability further, strengthening the debuff elements and dealing more damage. We don't actually have all the data for the base level, but we do have the data for maximum tide. At maximum tide, the extra scaling of the damage component is 30%. The slow is 40% at maximum tide, though that decays very, very quickly. The physical protection reduction also starts out at 40% at maximum tide, so you absolutely do not want to get hit by the ability at max charge. Additionally, the duration also depends on your tide, with a maximum of 4 seconds. The mana cost ranges from 60 to 80, and the cooldown scales down from 16 to 12 seconds. On the patch notes, Hyra said that this will likely be her primary clearing ability. Charybdis' third ability is the Whirlpool form. This turns her into a whirlpool with a lot of teeth, and the effect is somewhat similar to Vladimir from League of Legends if you're familiar with his puddle. She becomes untargetable, but she will deal damage to enemies that are in the whirlpool area. The damage is low at 10 to 30 with 5% physical power scaling and ticks once every 0.5 seconds. This ability also increases your movement speed by 20%. Charybdis is not only untargetable in whirlpool form but also damage immune, and this effect lasts for up to 3 seconds. However, the ability has roughly 0.5 seconds wind up, making it so that you can disrupt her while she goes into that animation, and it's a very obvious animation. The whirlpool form can also be amplified, similar to Pele's 3. If you activate the ability again, then you get the amplified form, which uses 30% of your tide. In return, the damage of the ability is amplified to 20 to 60, so the ticks are doubled, with 10% scaling as well. Additionally, the ability will now do a knock-up on exit. There is exit damage, which is 60 to 220 and scales with 65% of your physical power. The movement speed in the upgrade form is increased from 20 to 40%. The mana cost is 70 to 90 and the cooldown is 17 seconds, scaling down to 15 seconds at max rank, which is relatively short for such a strong escape. By the way, this ability also allows you to go through player-made walls but not normal conquest map walls. Last but not least, we have the ultimate, the Maw Hungers. This ability is somewhat inspired by Scylla's ultimate and shares many of the same components. While channeling the ability, Charybdis is also crowd control immune for 6 seconds and gains an additional 35% movement speed. She can then attack with the maw, and if she gets a kill with the ability, then it will reset and she can use it again, once again, much like Scylla. However, the ability itself functions differently. It has 2 parts, a line component and a wider cone effect at the end. However, you can choose the length of the ability and can make it so that it's right in front of you, in which case only the cone part will even appear and only the cone effect will apply. If you use the ability at a longer range and you use the line part of the component, what this will do is it will grab any enemy that is currently in that line and push them back to the end of it, setting them up for the follow-up damage and CC. The charge itself, the pushing part, does 60 to 180 damage and scales with 20% of your physical power, so this is not really the big damage. The bite damage at the end, on the other hand, deals 300 to 700 base damage and 150% of your physical power. These are honestly some pretty scary scalings for a already damage heavy hunter, I would say, that is primarily focused on basic attacks. The stun duration of the bite at the end is 1.3 seconds. The ultimate costs 100 mana and has a 90 seconds cooldown. Overall, I think Charybdis has a very interesting kit. I have a feeling that she's going to be relatively easy to learn, at least the basics, due to her wide abilities, but it's harder to learn to position with her, I'm assuming, though she does have an excellent escape as well. So far, my impression is that she will release towards the stronger side. We'll have to see in-game how big the delays really are to see how much impact that has on her damage output. Especially the one, I think, is a very potent ability, being a 4-second steroid that makes it easier to confirm basic attacks on enemies. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to click like and maybe subscribe if you want to see more like this, or if you want to see new world content as well. I hope to see you for the next one soon. Thank you very much for watching, and thanks to my patrons for making this video possible. That's That Nick Walker, Zelaria, Zed the Undead, Nevis Jr., Rawas, Angel, Erix88, Zifaroli, and everyone else you see here.